Markup, the Fiscal Year 2015 Commerce, Justice, Science, and Related Agencies Appropriations Bill. The budget deal last year set discretionary spending limits that allowed us to complete an omnibus bill for FY14, and now enables us to pursue an aggressive FY15 markup schedule. I appreciate Chairman Rogers and Ranking Member Ms. Lowy's commitment to advancing appropriations bills quickly this year. And I believe, I may be wrong, this may be the earliest we have ever marked up, which is a tribute to Mr. Rogers and Ms. Lowy. However, this 2-year respite from sequestration does not mean the nation's long-term budget problems have been solved. Far from it. If we are to succeed in putting the nation on secure fiscal footing, we will need to come together soon and put everything on the table, not just discretionary appropriations, but entitlement spending as well. I'll make a few remarks about the contents of the bill, but first I want to thank the ranking member, the gentleman from Pennsylvania, and Mr. Fattah. I look forward to continuing to work together as we progress toward conference and the enactment and the signing of this bill into law. I also want to acknowledge the rest of the subcommittee members, including new members, Judge Carter, who's not new, but he is new in this committee, Mr. Diaz-Balart, who's probably caught in the rain out there, and Mr. Ahmadi. I want to recognize the subcommittee majority staff, Leslie Albright, Jeff Ashford, Colin Samples, Diana Simpson, and Mike Ringler, and also Bob Bonner and Matt Smith from the minority staff for their work in preparing the bill today. They've done yeoman's work both for last year's bill and also for this one. Finally, I want to thank our committee chairman, the gentleman from Kentucky, who chaired this subcommittee for many years, and also the committee's ranking member, Mrs. Lowy. The recommendation we bring to the subcommittee contains $51.2 billion in discretionary spending. This is a $398 million, or 0.8% below the current fiscal year. We have focused limited resources on critical areas, including law enforcement, national security, weather forecasting, look at the tornadoes we just went through and are still going through today, and innovation and competitiveness. The allocation has allowed us to provide some modest increases to priority programs. I want to briefly describe some of the highlights of the bill for you today. The bill includes $8.4 billion for the Department of Commerce. Severe weather like the devastating tornadoes in the South this week, and which are, as I say, continuing today, too often result in the loss of life and economic disruption. I heard the story of a man down in Little Rock. He had 9 children. He went to rescue his kids, and he and 2 of his children were killed. That's why this bill includes funding above, let me just stress again, above the request for the National Weather Service operations, and a combined $1.9 billion providing full funding for NOAA's 2 next-generation weather satellite systems to provide the data that is essential to accurate warnings and forecasts. The bill also includes critical investments in manufacturing and job creation, including $130 million for the manufacturing extension partnerships. It also continues funding for a task force and a grant program to incentivize U.S. companies to bring their manufacturing and services activities back to the United States. Not out of the United States, but back into the United States. Another key priority of this bill is investment in sciences and space. It includes $8.3 billion for scientific research and related programs at NSF and NIST, including a record high level for NSF, so we can keep America competitive. Investments in scientific research are essential to long-term economic growth and job creation, and are the foundation for the security and economic well-being of future generations. Developing a well-educated STEM workforce is also critical to America's competitiveness. More than $1 billion is provided throughout the bill for science and technology, engineering, and math education. For NASA, the bill includes $17.9 billion, including $4.2 billion for space exploration. This funding will keep NASA on schedule for upcoming flight milestones for the Orion crew vehicle and the Space Launch System. I'm also pleased to note that the bill includes a significant increase for aeronautics research. Aerospace is a pillar of the American manufacturing sector, and this investment hopefully will help boost our aviation competitiveness and improve airspace safety. The bill also includes $5.2 billion for NASA science programs. This amount restores cuts in the President's request that would have inhibited progress on planetary science goals, including missions to Mars and Europa. As many of you know, last year the committee directed an external review that found vulnerabilities in NASA's security controls and practices. The bill funds the implementation of NAPA's recommendation. We had former Attorney General Thornburg, who was the Attorney General under President Bush 1, come in and look. They found the systems were compromised. If you read the report, it's troubling. I'm surprised the press has failed. I think it's maybe because NASA is trying to cover it up, but the systems are being compromised. And so we are taking the recommendations, including IT security, export control, and training, additional NASA counterintelligence personnel, and the operation of a new foreign national access management program. This should ensure that NASA follows through on the commitment to the committee to do much better in protecting cutting-edge technology and research from those who want to steal it. The bill provides $27.8 billion for the Department of Justice. The top mission priority of the Justice Department is now defending national security from both internal and external threats. The bill includes $8.5 billion for the FBI to protect the nation from terrorism and investigate federal crimes, including the growing threat of cyber intrusion, which Mr. Comey and then Mr. Mueller before him felt that it was even overtaking the threat from terrorism. Bureau of Prisons operations are funded at $7.0 billion. This bill gives priority to the activation of recently constructed prisons and maintaining staffing levels to ensure safe and secure federal prison facilities. The bill continues funding for the Chuck Colson Task Force on Federal Correction, which was created in the FY14 bill. The task force will make recommendations to reform corrections program to increase public safety, improve offender accountability, and reduce recidivism and control costs. And I think the prison system needs a major reform, and I think this is the opportunity to do it. The bill also includes $2.1 billion for justice grant programs, prioritizing proven programs including burn grant, justice assistance grants, SCAP, missing and exploited programs, and prescription drug monitoring, which Mr. Rogers has taken the lead on. The subcommittee held an important hearing in February on the horrible crime of trafficking in persons, including testimony from a victim. In this bill, we have increased, I stress again, we have increased funding for violence against women and victims of trafficking programs above the current level and above the President's request for each program. These are very significant increases for fighting trafficking and helping victims in Northern Virginia, but all through this area, but quite frankly, all through this country. This is the modern-day slavery, and it's unacceptable for this Congress to stand by and do nothing, for the administration to do nothing and allow sites like Backpage.com to continue is just offensive. And so we are going above that level, and we're going to try to break the back and deal with it. As you know, we also have every FBI field office part of a task force. We have every U.S. attorney now part of a task force, but we will end this. The problem of DNA testing backlogs at crime labs and at law enforcement agencies nationwide demands action. The bill includes $125 million for existing DNA programs and an additional $36 million to address the backlog of sexual assault kits at law enforcement agencies. The bill also includes important initiatives for keeping firearms out of the hands of prohibited persons and improving school safety. NICS background check system is only effective if state records are complete and included. And I think Dr. Harris made that case at a number of very important hearings we've had. This bill includes $58.5 million for grants to improve NICS records and $75 million to continue the comprehensive school safety initiative program begun in FY14. This is a summary of the recommendation before you today. The bill represents our best take on matching needs with scarce resources. At this point, it would be my intention to yield to Mr. Fattah. Then I would like to yield to the full committee chairman, Mr. Rogers, then to the full committee ranking member, Ms. Lowy, if they would like to make any remarks. Mr. Fatah?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and for the committee. We all understand that as we mark this bill up today, this will be an opportunity in which there will be a number of others in front of full committee on the floor, but I don't want to miss the opportunity to acknowledge the great work of our chairman, who's done a lot of work over his years here in the Congress. There's a long list of achievements that one could talk about. I don't want to focus on those. I want to just say that as an individual, he has had a great deal of integrity and has worked in a bipartisan way with the minority, but he's also been very aggressive as a member of Congress, even when there was not a crowd around. Before anyone else was talking about cybersecurity, he was out there, and you can go to human trafficking. I mean, issues that other members did not really deal with a lot around abuse in prisons, you know, a whole host of issues that as this work of this members look back on over the years, I think there will be a greater appreciation. But I want to thank the chairman for all of the courtesies that have been extended to me and my role in the minority. We've worked together on a lot of issues, and we've had a great deal of bipartisan success. And I wish you well. I know we're not finished yet. We have to get this bill enacted into law. And I know Chairman Rogers and Ranking Member Lowy want to see this bill enacted into law as we've done a great job, I think, in putting together a framework for our negotiations with the Senate. So let me first say that in terms of priorities that we've been focused on our side of this committee, in neuroscience, this bill has one of the most significant increases of any category is in this area of brain research, and also calling on the National Science Foundation, which is the premier entity, I think, in the federal research enterprise in terms of working on neuroscience, to host and work towards an international conference. This came out of our hearing earlier this year. So I just want to thank the chairman for his cooperation and leadership in this regard. I also want to mention the continuing support for youth mentoring. All of the national youth mentoring efforts are helping millions of young people. We need to do more. There are still millions of other young people who are not connected to any of the national evidence-based youth mentoring efforts. So there's more work to do, but through the work of this committee, we've done a great deal above what has been requested from the administration in these areas. And I would also mention the efforts around advanced manufacturing and support for manufacturing that the chairman and I have worked together on. The chairman is particularly focused on reshoring these jobs, and I've put a lot of effort on making sure that we bring technology to bear to help our small and medium-sized manufacturers through some of our science-related enterprises. So in this bill, there's a lot of individual, carefully carved out efforts and initiatives working with different members on both sides of the aisle, both Republican members and Democratic members working together. I think everyone on the subcommittee issues have been, I think, well represented in the product that we bring before the subcommittee today. There obviously, if we were doing the bill, there'd be a different set of numbers and weighted slightly differently. But I think that clearly this is a bipartisan product. I want to thank the chairman, and I look forward to us moving the bill to full committee at the appropriate time. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Fatah. I appreciate your comments, and I appreciate your friendship that we've had over the years, too. Mr. Rogers, the full committee chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations to you and Mr. Fatah and all the members of this subcommittee, I think, for a good bill. Chairman Wolf has just been an absolute marvel in the Congress. As you know, he feels strongly about some things. In fact, many things. And sometimes he lets you know how strongly he feels. And even though even though I may look decades younger, we came here together. We're classmates. We came here in 1980, and we've been close friends and collaborators ever since that time, especially on the work of this subcommittee, which, as he said, I chaired for a number of years and served as a ranking member for the others for a long, long time. So I have a particular fondness for the jurisdiction of this subcommittee, but especially to Frank Wolf, whom we've had the pleasure of serving with for these several years. This is a historic year for our committee, as has been mentioned. Frank says this is the earliest ever that we've marked up bills. I know that's so at least back to the 1974 Budget Control Act, under which we still operate, and perhaps even before that time. Nevertheless, it is early, and we're jumping on our chances of getting all 12 of these bills passed individually and conferenced with the Senate and into law. That's our goal, and Ms. Lowy and I are dedicated to it, as are our Senate counterparts. Returning to regular order is critical for at least two reasons. First, it's a very important step to restoring the confidence of the American people that the system is working and working on their behalf. Second, the Congress can and should assert its obligation and prerogative under the Constitution to manage our country's purse strings. This subcommittee has combed every line of the budget within its purview to provide these agencies like Commerce, Justice, NASA, National Science Foundation, and so on, with targeted, responsible, educated funding. This attention to detail and oversight is particularly important as we work to painstakingly reduce federal discretionary spending, which you've done by some $165 billion since fiscal 10. Certainly, this process has resulted in a lot of difficult choices, even as this bill before us today reduces spending by $398 million below the enacted level of current form. The members of this subcommittee have worked hard to continue to preserve core federal functions: fighting crime, gangs, terrorism, human trafficking, mitigating cyber terrorism, spurring job creation, boosting our country's competitiveness through smart investments in science and space. I'm particularly pleased to see the committee dedicate significant resources and attention to the scourge of prescription drug abuse. Some people may not have heard, we're having more people die from prescription drug overdose than car wrecks in this country. The Center for Disease Control calls it a national epidemic, prescription drug overdoses. My district was hit especially hard, perhaps ground zero, in the OxyContin movement that took place a few years ago. Now it's other drugs. I fear that Zohydro, recently okayed by the Federal Drug Administration, 5 times more powerful than Vicodin, being put out without any abuse deterrent characteristics, such as you can crush it and shoot it just like OxyContin used to be done. We fixed that. But I particularly appreciate Chairman Wolf and Mr. Fatton, the subcommittee, for supporting the drug enforcement agents, the U.S. attorneys, and all involved in their respective missions, as well as funds, for a small but effective grant program which Chairman Wolf started a few years ago within DOJ that helps states set up prescription drug monitoring programs to provide doctors and law enforcement people with potentially life-saving information about patients' prescription patterns, to prevent them from double filling or triple filling a prescription across a state line, perhaps. That's working. 49 states, Mr. Chairman, 49 states now have such a system. Only Missouri has failed to put a system in place. I hope Missouri sees the light and helps the rest of us keep people from dying. Nevertheless, that program that this subcommittee funds now is working on making those systems in each state interoperable, so that if you try to cross the state line to double fill a prescription, you can't get by with it, and to make it real time. There's a real effort going on here. I just got back from Atlanta, where the Unite anti-drug organization I put together in my district 10 years ago just hosted the 3rd annual National Summit on prescription drug abuse. We had 1,100 people there from every nook and cranny of the country, the experts in this problem. We had the head of National Institutes of Health, the head of DEA, the drug czar in the White House, 2 governors, 4 attorneys general, the head of FDA, and so on. An incredible gathering of people that came away enthused, because this is the only time of the year where all of the disciplines within the problem of drug abuse come together in a single meeting: social workers, judges, prosecutors, law enforcement, and so on. 4-day conference, the 3rd annual. Before I conclude, Mr. Chairman, I want to tip my hat and again to Frank Wolf. He served this committee with distinction and honor for quite literally decades. He's been a tireless advocate for the people of Northern Virginia and for the entire country, taking up the cause of those who might otherwise be left without a voice. He's a man of great courage, a man of great conviction. And Mr. Chairman, this body will be greatly diminished when you depart, but that hopefully, thankfully, will be sometime in the future. So I want to thank you for your incredible service to the people of your district, your state, and your nation, and the world, and for your work on this bill that we are considering today. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the comments, and I appreciate, the friendship over the years. There were 54 in our class. The fact is, it was the class that came here with President Reagan, and we just lost one. Mick Staten just died a week and a half ago. And so at the end of this term, it'll be down to you and Chris Smith. But you're in good hands. And I think the agreement we've had, if you recall, at the first meeting, that the last person here throws the biggest party ever. And so it's going to be between you and Chris. And, but I appreciate, and also on the drug issue, prescription, a lot of people have literally been saved because of Mr. Rogers. They will never know why. They will never know, because they never have gotten, but because of the work that Mr. Rogers has done, and I appreciate it. I think the Congress and the country is going to face the same thing now in heroin. And in the western part of my district, in the beautiful, idyllic Shenandoah Valley, the site of George Washington's first elective office, in 2012, there was 1 heroin overdose death. Last year, there were 21. And as of during the recess, I was at the meeting with the sheriffs. It had reached, I think, 12 or 13 as of mid-April, so they'll probably double. And so, but again, Mr. Rogers, I appreciate it very, very much.
Chairman Neal, for
yes.
You know, the problem first broke with the drug OxyContin, which is a wonderful 12-hour time-release painkiller for severe pain, super for terminally ill cancer patients and the like. But doctors, not knowing the problem that it was terribly addictive and terribly difficult to kick, began to prescribe it for toe aches and dentist for pain for filling a tooth. And they became addicted unknowingly and abused and died. We had, in my district, we were having kids die every day, young people especially. But now that the FDA finally required the manufacturer of OxyContin to fix it so it could not be abused. If you crushed it, you couldn't crush it. It was a gel-like thing. You couldn't shoot it up. You couldn't chew it. You couldn't use it. And that really helped with the problem. Then they users switched then to a drug called Opana. Same problem. We finally got FDA to fix it too. And now, just as I thought we're on the verge of a tremendous recovery from the problem, along comes the FDA, surprisingly overturning an 11-2 vote not to release Zohydro. Went ahead and released Zohydro. And I'm afraid, Mr. Chairman, we may be facing the same problem as we did with OxyContin. People dying by the droves because of addiction to this very powerful drug. But as the chairman says, now that we've made OxyContin and Opana and others abuse deterrent, users are now switching to heroin. It's cheaper. There's apparently a better supply network and the like. But it's just as addictive, just as troublesome as the others. And now with the advent in Colorado and Washington State of legalization of marijuana, the marijuana growers in Mexico are plowing up the plants and planting poppy to make heroin. And we're substituting one terrible problem for another. And as the price of marijuana now is plummeting because of these legalization efforts, and the lax attitude of the Department of Justice toward marijuana enforcement, because of that, the price of heroin is dropping, and the problem proceeds from there. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm disappointed at the administration's position on marijuana in and of itself, but mainly because it's having these profound effects on more serious problems, more serious drugs. And so I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Lilly?
Well, thank you very much. And before I make my statement, I also want to thank you, Mr. Chairman Wolf, for your passionate commitment to a whole range of issues. You've served this committee with such distinction. And this bill, I say this about many of the bills, but whenever I read this bill, it is so exciting to see the wide range of issues that you address here. And I know that whatever the next chapter is in your life, you will continue to approach the issues you are passionate about in your calm, low-key, dispassionate style. And I am sure your voice will continue to ring out, whether it's in Washington, D.C., or whether it's in my hometown as you visit your daughters up in Westchester County, as you visit your daughter in Westchester County. And by the way, Mr. Big Chair, this issue of heroin is all over. And when I look at the news and I see the numbers, 20, 30, 40, it is shocking. Well, you have a lot of issues to choose from, Frank Wolf, and I look forward to hearing from you. And again, as I said, I know your voice will continue to reverberate on the many issues you care about. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your passion. It's really been an honor and a pleasure for me to work with you, and I wish you good luck. And I hope we'll meet in Westchester County. Let me just again thank the chair and the ranking member for your hard work on this bill. As I mentioned, the bill is so varied, and when I read the research section, congratulations to all of you, because I know those with Alzheimer's and autism, and we can go on, are so grateful for the commitment of this committee and our chair and ranking member to the investments in research there. I go on these walks every year, whether it's autism or Alzheimer's. I think we're up to 10,000 in the autism walk, and we still don't have the information. So I thank you and Mr. Fattah for focusing on the brain. It is so very important. There are so many areas here, just to touch on them a bit. The funding levels for public safety, such as burn justice assistant grants, National Instant Criminal Background Check System, Violence Against Women Act services, the human trafficking section, so very important. I'm very pleased that this bill would also provide $125 million for the DNA initiative, as well as $36 million for a new community backlog reduction program to process sexual assault kits. I have been shocked when I began to hear about that, how that these kits would sit on a shelf for years, sometimes decades, when information contained in these kits could help identify violent criminals and put them behind bars. It's truly amazing that they would sit there. And often you would have multiple crimes occurring because we didn't have that information. So I thank you. And while I appreciate Chairman Wolf's efforts to work across the aisle to fund so many vital services, I continue to be concerned about the needless gun riders, including a new attempt to prohibit funding to implement an arms trade treaty. These riders, frankly, my colleagues, have no place in an appropriations bill. It is my hope that when this bill comes to the floor, that we can work together to keep out unnecessary riders that make it easier for deadly firearms to make their way into our communities. There are items of concern that I hope can be addressed on the full committee or on the floor. The COPS program, a very important program, would be cut by $118 million from current funding under this bill, as well as the, quote, wet side of NOAA, which includes cuts of over 5% to coastal zone management grants. That was always a favorite of mine before I came to Congress, because it really would empower local communities to make a determination as to what they want their waterfronts to look like, so people couldn't just come in, developers, and impose on them without their giving some thoughtful consideration. And the 40% to fisheries, habitat conservation, and restoration. And while the bill funds NOAA weather satellites and the National Weather Service, it includes a sizable cut of 24% to NOAA's climate research account. Storms and weather events are becoming more frequent, more severe. The 100-year storms occur even in my area every 2 years these days. We should be investing in research to combat the threat of climate change, not sticking our heads in the sand, hoping the science is wrong, because combating such an obstacle would be too costly and inconvenient. We have the opportunity to make better investments in this bill that could help provide for the health and safety of future generations of Americans, and I hope we act together to do so. So in closing, I just want to thank you, my friend, for your service. You came to Congress for the right reasons. You served with the right motivations. You've addressed so many issues that matter to your community, our community, to the United States of America, to the world, in fact. So I know you will continue to speak out, as I said before, in your calm, measured, dispassionate, but effective style. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Loy. I appreciate your comments. Thank you. Are there any other, Mr. Culberson?
Mr. Chairman, I remember in Proverbs tells us that our most valuable possession is our good name, and it's worth more than all the gold and silver in the world. And by that measure, Frank Wolf, you're the wealthiest man on earth. You, as Ms. Loy said, came here for the right reasons, and it's just a privilege to have served with you, sir, and to be here on this subcommittee with you and see the importance you place on issues that others, as Mr. Fatah says, have often neglected. As the Chairman Rogers pointed out, the human trafficking, abuse in our prisons, the passion that you bring to protecting persecuted Christians around the world. The work that you've done, it is often unknown and should be known by people around the country because of your vision and leadership and the passion that you bring to this job and the work that you've done in this subcommittee and others. You've transformed lives for generations to come, particularly with the passion that you bring to the investment in the sciences are so important for the future prosperity of the nation. My hero, Thomas Jefferson, often said that the liberty was the firstborn child of science. And I always remember also that he said in his last letter that he ever wrote, in turning down an invitation to attend the 50th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, literally a few weeks before he died, Thomas Jefferson said that I'm sorry I can't join you for the 50th anniversary celebration because age and my physical condition prevent me. But he said I hope that the annual return of this day will always remind people that the light of science is opening the eyes of humanity to the palpable truth that half of humanity is not born with a saddle on their back, or the other half born booted and spurred, ready to ride them, and that it truly has been our investments in science and research in cutting-edge technologies that has led to the advancement of civilization. As long as there's been an advancement of civilization, it truly is so vital, and you recognize that better than anyone. And when we first discover life on another world, it will be because of your work on making sure that we go to Europa, which is 3 to 4 times more water than the Earth, and vast amounts of heat, all the elements that are necessary for the discovery of life. It's right there in our backyard, and thanks to you and the subcommittee and the work that you've done, it will be NASA and heavy lift rocket, I hope, that's going to be built in Mr. Adderholt's district that will be there to discover life on another world right in our own backyard. The extraordinary achievements that this nation has enjoyed because of our investment in science owe a great deal to you, sir, and it's just a privilege to be here with you and to serve with you in this extraordinary subcommittee. And I thank you for being a role model and a mentor to me and so many others. And for all your work on behalf of this country, I thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Coleman.
Mr. Chairman?
I appreciate it. Yes, Mr. Schiff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to add my voice to that of my colleagues, and thank you for the extraordinary leadership you provided over decades now for human rights all around the world. You've been an unfailing champion, one of the most successful and passionate advocates for the downtrodden, whether they're halfway around the world or they're in our own prisons. And you leave a remarkable legacy that your, is it 15 grandchildren? 16. Can be very, very proud of. When they grow older and learn what their grandfather did in this Congress, they'll be enormously proud. And I can't imagine any greater legacy to leave than that. I also want to thank you for the extraordinary efforts you've made to save planetary science and push back against some devastating cuts. And every year, and in particular this year, you've been just extraordinarily supportive, which means a lot to the nation's future and our continued leadership in planetary science. And I just want to tell you how very grateful I am for everything you've done in all of these areas. It's been a real privilege to serve with you. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Schiff. I appreciate it. Mr. Honda? Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I would like to add my voice to those who are thanking you for your service. And I'll try not to speak too long. A lot of things have been said, but I remember when, after the tsunami in Indian Ocean in 2004, you took your concern for the victims and turned it into action, urging development of an enhanced tsunami prediction and warning capability for the U.S. and for the world. That was critical. And when things weren't going well in Iraq, you took a stand that may not have been very popular with your own party, but you pushed for the formation of the Iraq Study Group, and that was appreciated. Last year, when sequestration was threatening the opening of the Silicon Valley Patent Office, you sat down with me and some of the U.S. PTO officials to brainstorm how we could move forward, and now the lease has been signed, and work is progressing, and we'll be moving forward with that. for that I'm grateful. We both share a great commitment to protect the human rights around the world, and I imagine you will continue to be a force to be reckoned with on these issues even after you retire. I'm deeply appreciative of the provisions you have included in this bill to help combat human trafficking and to reduce the backlog of processing the rape kits by enhancing the use of rapid DNA testing, which will get offenders off the streets and bring justice to the victims. I also want to share the belief that domestic manufacturing is critical for growing our economy in America. And thank you for the provision you've included in this bill and to support manufacture as well as basic R&D, and both on the ground and in space. And that will keep America on the cutting edge of science. And thanks as well for including the funding for the continued operation of NASA's Sophia Observatory. It was a great help. You've been, as has been said by others, a passionate advocate for the cause you believe in. And I've always felt that there was nothing unclear about how you felt, the opinions you had. So it was, for me, it was very clear, the issues and how to work with you too, because I believe that folks have to work with each other, sit down and work across the aisle. So I appreciate you helping me personally solve some of the problems to make not only our constituents in our country and our district better, but for the world. So I thank you for the help that you provided me and the guidance that you provided me and the help with your staff also. So it's been a real honor to be able to
Thank you, Mr.
serve
Hunt.
with you. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr.
Mr. Chairman, I suspect that the line of people at the full committee meeting and on the floor will be long in saying these things about you. So we who are on this committee have the privilege of having a little time and not waiting online to say them. And I just wanted to tell you that, you know, anyone who will listen, and even those who won't listen, I brag about the fact that I'm the only member of this committee who was ranking member to you, both you and Mr. Rogers, on this committee. So that should not, there's a question as to why I'm sitting at the end now. But that's it had nothing to do with them kicking me down here. It had to do with some revamping on my side so I could be a ranking member. But anyway, we had interesting stories here. You are living proof, perhaps more than anyone else I've known in this House, and Chairman Rogers comes close, but how you can be so different in your political philosophy to someone and be a partner for that person. And I think you and I are living proof of that. You're not exactly known as a flaming liberal, and I'm not, the word conservative doesn't come up when you mention my name. and yet we've been able to work together with respect, with dignity, and with understanding that we weren't named to this position, that whether it's in front of a Veterans Hall or in front of a subway station, we both have to beg people to vote for us. And most of them think we're crazy the first time they see us or the second time and so on. And you leave a great legacy. And your biggest legacy is that you were ahead of time, ahead of your time. You brought up the drug issue of OxyContin and so on before a lot of people brought it up. You warned us that there were people, other countries being nice to us, and coming from a liberal, this is a big statement, very nice to us while they were looking at our computers. And a lot of people were not paying attention at that time, and now everybody knows you're right. Lastly, I want to thank you for always including the territories, which you know is part of my mantra, that there are 5 million American citizens who don't get to vote for their commander-in-chief, but go to all our wars and suffer all the consequences. And you have always legislated on this committee in a way that the territories get taken care of. And in closing, let me tell you that recently, and this will probably get back to Puerto Rico, recently I saw on one of the cable stations that I get from the island, the first Puerto Rican astronaut being paraded throughout the island with great glory. And I said, I wonder if he or anybody on the island knows that we asked NASA here, with your support, and you back me up, you think that there will be somebody from, someday there'll be somebody from Puerto Rico or Puerto Rican parents who'll be an astronaut? And the answer was, well, we're going to start working on that. And when I saw the parade, I said, little do they know. And that's part of your legacy. Little do they know of all that you've done. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Serrano. Thank you. Mr. Carter.
Frank, I'd like to echo what everyone said here. And my first boss was the parliamentarian of the House of Representatives in Texas, Bob Johnson. And he once told me, as he taught me what to look for in the legislative body, he said, the greatest asset anyone could bring to a legislative body is be a man of their word or a woman of their word. When they told you they would do something, they would do it, sometimes even to their detriment. And I think as you pass out of Congress, that reputation goes with you. You were never afraid to speak your mind. You spoke it straight, and you gave. And if you told someone, and I've experienced this, I will do this, you did it. That is, I think, in any legislative body, but especially the ultimate legislative body, the United States Congress, that is the greatest reward anyone can have, to have a reputation of being a person who spoke their mind and kept their word. And I thank you for it.
Mr. Chairman, I don't want to repeat everything that's been said, but however, it's as you see today, it's been said in a heartfelt way. Mr. Serrano just said about, little do so many people know about what Frank Wolf has meant to them and will mean to them and to their children and their grandchildren. I will tell you, however, that when it comes to those in the gulags, whether it's the gulags in communist China or in Cuba or in North Korea or in Iran, there they do know. There they know the name, Frank Wolf. So your legacy, which is so extensive, my dear friend, I think, however, when it comes to the folks who have been repressed and oppressed anywhere in the world, Frank Wolf is a name that symbolizes freedom and symbolizes that relentless pursuit of freedom. And for the gulags, frankly, it's a name that means hope. So your shoes will not be able to be filled by us. We have a difficult task to try to fill your shoes, my friend, and you will severely be missed, obviously by us personally, but particularly by those who continue to suffer in the gulags, but who will always remember your name. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Nesbitt. Mr. You have a motion, Mr. Anybody else have? Mr. Amity, excuse me.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Unlike Mr. Serrano, there is a reason why I'm sitting at the end of the line on this side. And I want you to know that even though they didn't know it at the time, the major four-year institution of higher education in my district, the University of Nevada, Reno, when they picked a mascot name in your honor over 150 years ago, named it the Wolf Pack. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Do you have a motion?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
Anyone else? Okay, Mr.
I just want to thank Serrano for switching places with me from thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I do have a motion. But before I do that, I do want to add my comments to my colleagues this morning for the work that you've done on this, and not only this subcommittee, but this committee and this Congress, and in Congress in general. And I was just thinking about maybe the best way to sum it up, and thinking about the words of Theodore Roosevelt when he talked about being in the arena. And if you remember, he said, it's not the critic who counts, and it's not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or whether the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who's actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood. Now, I hadn't seen that much blood, but I know there has been a lot of dust and sweat. And I know that a lot of people don't know the extent that you have stood up for religious freedom around the world. And to me, that is something that is stands head and shoulders above so many issues and that so many of us work on. So we thank you for your work. But at this time, I would like to move the chairman's mark and that it be reported to the full committee.
Okay. Before I call for the vote, let me just thank all of you for your friendship and for the good work and, you know, for all the efforts, the members and also the staff. I'm very, very grateful. So with that, we ask all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It carries. I ask unanimous consent that the staff be given the authority to make technical and conforming changes to the items approved today. Without objection, so ordered. If there's no further business, committee stands adjourned.